or effect over time. Obedient, complying or willing to comply to orders or commands. Submissive to another's will. What is it that these two definitions have in common? 1 Corinthians 15:18 gives us some insight, saying, "Therefore, my beloved brothers, be steadfast, immovable, always abounding in the work of the Lord, knowing that in the Lord your labor is not in vain." Today I'll be discussing the value of being consistent and the impact it can have on our lives and the lives of those around us. So what does it mean to be consistent? I've narrowed consistency down to two categories. The first of these being spiritual consistency. Another term for this could be sanctification. This refers to our walk with the Lord. This is a key step in our walk as believers. We have to make the choice every single day to follow the Lord and ultimately grow to become more like Him. The next of these categories would be physical consistency. While these categories are similar, they are not quite the same. This is something core to who I am and to my identity. Throughout my life, I have seen the many benefits that can come from a consistent lifestyle, while also seeing the many negatives that an inconsistent lifestyle can bring. Laziness, pride, and ignorance are just a few things that can lead you down a road of inconsistency. A consistent life is a hard one to live. It requires diligence, obedience, humility, and most importantly, the help and guidance of the Lord. I would like to share with you all today how I think consistency is a benefit to everyone's life and what I have learned from my research on this topic. Living a consistent and obedient life serving the Lord allows us to be greater servants to those around us. This idea is something that is prominent in the culture here at MCA. Throughout high school, we are taught in a way that trains us to become better servant leaders to those around us. Psalm 123 verses 1 and 2 say, "I lift my eyes to you who sit enthroned in heaven. As the eyes of slaves look to the hand of their master, as the eyes of a female slave look to the hand of her mistress, so our eyes look to the Lord our God till He shows us His mercy." The two verses at the beginning of this passage make one thing noticeably clear. If we truly want to serve the Lord, we must take the position of one. We are not to look down upon the Lord or even see ourselves as equal to Him, but rather we ought to look up to Him with a great deal of reverence. Simply put, God is not our magic lamp. He did not walk this earth so that we could use Him as a tool to get whatever we want, whenever we want. If we take this stance, we can never truly grow in our relationship with the Lord, or even have a relationship with Him at all. God is worth our attention. He is a God that we can and must look up to. The moment we do this is the moment we are truly in a posture of servitude. John 15:12-13 says, "My command is this, love each other as I have loved you. Greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends." So how does this relate to Psalm 123? Not only does the Lord call us to serve Him, He calls us to serve those around us as well. This was something that I learned this past summer working at the Midland T-Bar M Day Camp. Throughout the 8 weeks I was there, I got the opportunity to work with kids that could have been anywhere from kindergarten to 6th grade. Doing this every single day was not an easy task. There were many days when I woke up with only the thought of myself in mind. How can I make this day easier for me? How can I get by without any inconveniences? And things of that sort. I learned throughout the summer that this was a faulty stance to take. If I truly wanted to pour into these kids' lives and show them the love of God, then I had to take the position of a servant and put myself last. It was not something that I could just decide overnight and then be good for the rest of the weeks, but it was a conscious decision that I had to make every single second of every single day. It is this consistency, the choice to serve the Lord daily, this sanctification process that allows us to serve others well. Living a life that is consistent and obedient to the Lord allows us to serve everyone to the best of our ability. When we live our life in a consistent manner, it will lead to more fruitful relationships. What are some characteristics we desire when thinking of a best friend or a spouse? Some things that come to mind for me is I want someone who's always going to be there for me, pick me up at my lows, love me no matter what, celebrate me at my highs, and tell me the truth when I need to hear it the most. While these characteristics are all great, they are all meaningless if they do not have this aspect of consistency. Take, for example, a friendship. I would not be the best friend that I could possibly be if I only celebrated my friends at their highs, but was never there for them at their lowest points in life. Proverbs 17:17 gives us a perfect example of this saying, "A friend loves at all times, and a brother is born for a time of adversity." The key wording in this passage is "at all times." Notice how it doesn't say some of the time, or most of the time, or when you feel like it, it says "at all times." We have to remember this if we truly want relationships with friends, family, coworkers, or simply anyone we come into contact with to truly flourish. If we can make the daily choice to love those around us every day, to consistently be there for them no matter the circumstances, I truly believe that our relationships will prosper. While consistency can be beneficial spiritually and relationally, it can also be beneficial in our worldly endeavors. Something that comes to mind when thinking of this is sports, specifically the NBA. An NBA player practices 2.5 hours a day, every single day, with the exception of game days. When they're not practicing or playing a game, they spend their time watching film, lifting weights, stretching, making sure their nutrition is on point, getting the proper amount of sleep. Basically doing anything and everything that they can to improve at their craft. Another thing that comes to mind is school. Typically in school, you have two types of students. There's the passing students and the failing students. A failing student is inconsistent about his work. They don't turn their work in on time. They're not showing up ready to class. They're not showing up to class prepared. They're not turning in their work on time. They're not studying for upcoming tests or quizzes. A passing student is the opposite. They're always prepared. They're always showing up ready to learn. They're getting help when they need it the most. And they're always ready for class. I think the primary difference between these two students is consistency. The failing student severely lacks consistency, while the passing student excels in it. We can see in both the passing student and the NBA player that they can attribute their success to consistent lifestyle. Both of these people know the immense amount of consistency it takes to meet the standard that they've set for themselves. Being consistent can most certainly help us in our daily endeavors. Consistency will lead us to see the value and the importance of the small things in life. We can all admit that it is an easy and common occurrence to get caught up in the craziness of life. We can get so focused on how much money we make. Are we going to get the job? Are we going to pass the class? How is our sports team doing? While these are not bad things to care or strive for, we can get so focused on the end result that we lose sight of the small things that life brings us. I believe it is most beneficial for us to take life day by day, and the big things will come along the way. When we choose to live a lifestyle that is consistent, these large goals that we have will become more achievable. Let us take work, for example. If you go to work every single day, only focused on the paycheck, you're going to lose passion for your job very quickly. However, if you go to work with a desire to learn something new, excited for the opportunity that you get to provide for your family, seeking to pour into your coworkers, then you're going to begin to love your job, and sure enough, this paycheck will follow. In our curriculum here at Midland Classical Academy, we read and study the work of the famous atheist Friedrich Nietzsche. In Great Books 4 specifically, we read what is titled as A Prelude to a Philosophy of the Future, Beyond Good and Evil. Throughout Nietzsche's writings, despite his atheistic points of view, he gives some valuable insight regarding this premise that we're discussing. Nietzsche says, "The essential thing in heaven and in earth is, apparently, that there should be a long obedience in the same direction. There thereby results, and has always resulted in the long run, something which has made life worth living. For instance, virtue, art, music, dancing, reason, spirituality, anything, whatever that is transfiguring, refined, foolish, or divine." There is a lot to unravel in this quote, but the idea is fairly simple. Nietzsche is saying that whenever we are in heaven or on earth, we ought to be in a constant state of obedience. He then reaches the conclusion that this will lead us down the path to something that makes life worth living. Nietzsche's logic and reasoning relate perfectly with the idea that a consistent and obedient lifestyle will lead to an appreciation of the daily grind. It is important for us to not get too caught up in the end goals that can distract us from everyday life. A life of consistency will allow us to have a greater appreciation for the small things in life. When researching this topic, I did find that there could be some arguments against consistency. The main thing that someone could say is, well, what if I'm just consistently bad? What if someone is always stealing, always lying, always cheating, always skipping school? They're a consistent person, right? But that does not make them a good person, and you don't see any virtues in their life. While this is a good point to make, I think the best way to refute this argument is by clearly defining consistency. Let us look back at our initial definition, which says that consistency is being unchanging in nature, standard, or effect over time. There can be some room for interpretation, as it does not necessarily say that the nature that you're not changing is beneficial. However, I think this can be easily argued by looking at our human nature and desires. To be consistent is something that we actively have to pursue. I would argue that to be consistently bad is just to be inconsistent. For example, if I was always rude to my parents and continuously showed disrespect to them, one could say that I'm consistently doing wrong. However, I would be more inclined to say that in that instance, I'm just being inconsistent about doing good. As humans who are born in sin, it is our natural desire to be drawn towards sin. In that situation, when I'm arguing with my parents, I'm not in an active pursuit to be a bad person. I'm simply living in accordance to my sin nature. We have to choose to consistently do good, because if we fail to do so, then we will be living in our sin nature, thus meaning we are inconsistent. My final reason to believe that a consistent lifestyle is beneficial for each and every one of us is simple. As believers, the Lord loves us every day, and we ought to share that love with others. To better understand this topic, I researched the work of Eugene Peterson titled, Along Obedience in the Same Direction. Throughout the work, Peterson talks about society's fixation on the quick fix and how it's become a problem today, especially in Christianity. He gives many valuable quotes on consistency and why he believes it's beneficial. The one that stuck out to me most says, "And yet I decide every day to set aside what I can do best and attempt what I do very clumsily. Open myself to the frustrations and failures of loving, daring to believe that failing in love is better than succeeding in pride." Every single day he has a choice to make. He can take the easy road, the road of pride, the road where he puts himself first, the road where no growth happens. Or he can take the other road, the road where he puts the Lord and others first, striving to love everyone to the best of his ability, seeking growth in all areas of life. The second road is not an easy road to take. A verse that we can remember in our journey is Lamentations 1:3, which says, "The steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. His mercies never come to an end. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness." This verse is a great example of the consistency of our Father. We can discuss morality and works all we want, but our ultimate goal as believers is to be more like Christ. God is the perfect example of consistency because he is the only one who is consistently perfect. Remembering the steadfast love that the Lord has for us is reason enough to wake up every day and love those around us constantly. To further my knowledge on the idea of consistency, I got the pleasure of interviewing Dr. Brian Fairchild, head pastor of Colonial Bible Church. We began the interview by discussing how society is so focused on today's quick fix, especially in Christianity. Today, if we want to find a verse, we can pull out our phone, find it in 2 seconds, close the tab, and never think about it again. It used to be where we had to pull out our Bible, sit down, open it up, flip through Scripture, find the verse, read through context, maybe even highlight it and write a little note. While he believes that the development of Bible apps and websites are not inherently a bad thing and that they have actually caused a lot of good, he believes that this is a prime factor in today's lukewarm Christianity and even a sense of complacency. I then began asking him how one could live a life of consistency. He told me the first thing to do is you have to find someone to hold you accountable. The reasoning for this is obvious. If we have someone to help guide us along the way, we are more likely to stick to it and grow in that area. The next thing he says is we have to find what we truly love. If we truly love our family, we're going to be much more inclined to be consistent about going to work every day to provide for them, loving them to the best of our ability, going to their T-ball games just to see that smile on their face. The last thing he says is that we have to pray to the Lord for guidance and wisdom in this area of our life. I believe that Dr. Fairchild gave some valuable advice and wisdom on this topic, and I believe that if we can truly take this to heart and follow it, then we will certainly grow in this area of our life. My study on this topic has opened my eyes to many different reasons why a consistent life is a virtuous one. Consistency allows us to be greater servants to those around us. It will lead to more fruitful relationships. It gives us an appreciation for the little things in life. It will help us grow in our daily pursuits. And lastly, it will allow us to share the consistency of the Lord's love to those around us. This lifestyle, along obedience in the same direction, is not an easy one by any means. However, I fully believe that when we decide to be all in as God has called us, we will truly flourish as he intended. Thank you.
Congratulations, Brett.
Thank you.
Is this thing on? Are we on now? We are. All right. Well, congratulations again.
Thank you.
You did a great job.
Thanks.
What are your plans for next year?
So I will be going to DBU, and I have the pleasure of rooming with Logan Acuff. Go Pats. And I will be I'll be majoring in kinesiology with a minor in business.
Okay. Very good. My first question is, what caused you to choose this topic?
So for me, I've just seen lately how like everything in life requires consistency. And I think the main thing was when I got injured earlier this year, I really saw how consistent you have to be in, rehabbing. And if you're not, then you're not really going to grow in that area. And then I kind of just took that to heart and noticed it in all areas of life. So
Okay. But you chose this topic before you got injured, right? So what made you choose it? What made you choose it then?
I honestly didn't realize I chose it before that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, also through I guess not necessarily rehab, but just exercise in general. You only really see results through consistency. And also working at T-Bar M, it was the same thing. I could only see growth through consistency. So.
Okay, very good. Do you have any specific stories or examples from, let's say, T-Bar M or your fitness journey where you've struggled in this area and then you found a way to learn from that?
Well, it kind of relates to both T-Bar M and fitness, actually. So while I worked there, I was not very diligent about maintaining fitness, and so I definitely saw a severe decline in all the progress I had made just because I took those weeks off. And so that's kind of when I really learned how important it is to stay active in those things.
Okay, very good. We might come back to that in just one second. But I'm curious about how someone develops this idea of diligence or consistency in their life. You kind of brought up a couple examples like the failing student and the passing student. Mm-hmm. And you did a good job of explaining, well, I can be consistent, but I can be consistently bad. It doesn't mean that's a good thing. Mm-hmm. How would you encourage somebody who, let's just call it being consistently bad to generalize, how would you encourage somebody to begin to be consistently good?
I think it is one of those things you kind of have to see the results of it first. So it's hard to make that initial step, because I think if you just tell someone hey, if you're consistent about doing your schoolwork, you're going to see growth. But it's really something you kind of have to just try it and trust it. And then once you see the results, you'll definitely start to grow in that area. Because I could say, go home and study every day and you're going to improve your grades. And it's ultimately they kind of have to see those grades improve to truly buy into it. So it's kind of a blind initial step, but then I really think once you start seeing results, then it becomes a lot easier down the road.
Okay, I'm going to push into that a little bit harder because let's say that I go off to college and these classes are, let's just say they're harder than I thought. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to go home and study at night, harder for longer. Yeah. But I still see poor grades or maybe even worse grades. Mm-hmm. Well, I'm taking that initial step, but I'm not seeing the results out of that. Are there any other strategies for coming up with a way to be consistently good besides just going to my dorm room and trying harder on my own?
Well, I guess that kind of goes back to what I said in my paper where it's you don't necessarily want to focus on the results so much. And so I guess when you start to see the results is kind of when it becomes easier. But if you're so caught up in that, then when you don't see results instantly, then you're going to kind of fall away from it. So it's I think it's important to just have that faith and trust that you're doing the right thing. And hopefully down the road that those good grades will come. But right now it's I'm doing the best I can. I'm growing in this area. And it's I just got to keep working hard,
Yeah, okay. I'll leave that for now. I'm going to go to one other topic real fast that you mentioned in your paper. You said this idea that true love will drive consistency, that if you have a love for something, it will cause you to be more consistent, more diligent in it. And I think I agree with that. Do you have any examples in your life that that illustrate this, where I love something so much that I'm going to, invest my time into that thing?
Definitely. For a long time, it was basketball for sure. Like, I mean, I liked to go to every single practice, every single off-season thing, every single tournament, like work out at home, basically doing everything I could to improve at that. So I think that's kind of what initially started the road of consistency for me, was just because I really had a passion for basketball, and so I could see growth in that area.
Okay, yeah, that's really good. What about something that that you don't love at first, but the more time that you put into it, you come to learn to love?
Mm-hmm.
Because that would be more of the flip side, where your diligence and consistency grows a love for something. Can you think of any examples of how that might work?
Definitely. So, I mean, for me personally, I wouldn't necessarily say I love school, but I think you can always, no matter what you do, you can always find something you love that connects with it. So I love my parents, and they provide the school for me, and so it's like ultimately I can strive to be consistent in school because I love my parents. Not necessarily that I love school, but then maybe as I'm consistent in school and, start to see better grades or start to learn new things, and then I might start to develop that love for school.
That's a really good thought, because what I was thinking of when I thought about that question is, kind of your fitness journey, right? So when we came back to school this year, it was a very different Brett than previous years. He barely fit into that shirt back in there with those shoulders and biceps.
Gosh.
But I'm thinking about that because you probably didn't go to the gym that first day or second day and just say, "Man, this feels so good. I love this so much. I'm coming back here again tomorrow."
No.
But what you're saying is it probably was your love of, let's say, something greater, maybe basketball or something else that drove you to do that.
Right.
Okay, very good. I'm going to read you one quote, and then I'll let Mr. Bowden take over. So this is from C.S. Lewis's Mere Christianity, and I kind of want to get your thoughts on this, how it relates to what we were saying, and if you agree with him or not. He said, "Do not waste time bothering whether you love your neighbor. Act as if you did. As soon as we do this, we find one of the great secrets. When you are behaving as if you love someone, you will presently come to love him." How do you think that kind of relates to all the things we've just been talking about?
I mean, I think it relates pretty perfectly, because in that instance, it's like you love the Lord, and so you're going to follow his commands and love those around you. And so it's like, even if you know deep down that you really don't like this person, if you're striving to love the Lord and in turn love that person, then I think over time that will actually grow into a true love for that person. And so,
yeah, okay, very good. I like that answer a lot. Pass it on to Mr. Bowden.
Brett, good job.
Thank you.
I've enjoyed getting to know you this last year. I don't know the Brett that he was referring to before this year, but I've been very impressed with the Brett that I've come to know this year. Most of our interaction has been in the weight room, and I think consistent is probably the perfect word I would say. Fits your relationship with the weight room that I've seen. Especially coming from the injuries and, coming back. And it's not just being consistent, but also being curious. I think you asked a lot of great questions as far as, hey, what can I expect if I do this? What would be the best thing to do if this is my goal? And which has led to good conversations and just a really great experience for me of coming back to MCA and seeing that some things don't change as far as just quality of character in the students, and that's been really refreshing and encouraging. So which way to go? Okay, so I want to go back to definitions. I am very much about definitions. I think words are important. and so you gave us two definitions: consistent and obedient. Consistent. Well, let's do this. Let's go a different way. So consistent. You said. You talked about sanctification. We'll talk about that. Sanctification and how consistency is, I think you said choosing every day, something to that effect, choosing every day to follow Christ. And so sanctification is an ever-growing, is a gradual change towards the perfecting of who we are, right?
Right.
And consistency, by definition, is the opposite of change, right? And so, how do those two things coexist? How do these two dynamic tension? How does that dynamic tension, I guess, coexist? Yeah, I guess that's the question: is how can you be consistent and yet ever changing?
I think so. I think both of those promote a deal of growth in a sense. And so I guess, like, if you're consistent in your walk with the Lord, which would also be sanctification, I would say, some things are going to be bound to change, but it's ultimately a consistent growth, I would say. Not necessarily doing the same things, but consistently striving to be better.
Okay, so the consistency is in the effort.
Right.
Okay, so consistent means I'm going to give the unchanging amount of effort throughout this process. That's the ideal of it. And the obedience, I think, is where the... So I'll have to talk louder over the water. Sorry.
Got a little thirsty.
I'm just kidding. You've earned it. The obedience is where the change comes. Because that's the two words that you defined was consistency and obedience. And I'm someone, like I said, I love words, but I also like simplicity. So I guess I always strive to, how do we simplify this down to one word? And so if you could come up with one word that combines consistent and obedient, what might that word be?
Maybe like steadfastness.
Okay. Why?
I'd say, because I would say being steadfast is a form of consistency.
Yeah.
But it's also like, I mean, it does promote growth as well.
Yeah. And there's a loyalty aspect to it as well. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Which is important with obedience. Yeah. Okay. I can see that. He talked about, me being Mr. Snell, talked about the student who was convinced to be diligent and yet did not see improvement, perhaps. You know, how do you continue to motivate that person to be consistent? I'm going to go the other way. What about you have the student who is completely inconsistent, borderline lazy, that still sees the good results?
Right.
What is the importance of consistent for that person? How do we encourage or inspire that person to be consistent in their effort when it seems like they don't really need to in order to be successful?
Right. So, I mean, I always think you can grow whether you're already very naturally gifted or not so naturally gifted. I mean, because you can see it in the example of like the NBA player. Like, they're already the best at what they do. They already won the genetic lottery. They're supernaturally gifted. But they're still consistent about putting in the work because they know that they can always reach that next level. And I think the that also kind of goes back to like seeing the value of the small things in life. Like, it's not necessarily all about the result. Like, striving to improve can be like much more valuable than actually improving in and of itself.
Yeah, no, I love that answer. That's where I was hoping you'd go with it. So you did well.
Thank you.
And then you broke up. Take one more. That's right. You broke up into two categories of consistency. You have spiritual and physical.
Right.
So how can those two different categories affect each other? How can spiritual affect the physical, or vice versa?
So I think in a negative sense, you can get too focused on the physical to where you're not prioritizing the spiritual. I mean, just taking it back to simpler terms, like, if I was so focused on basketball, I could easily lose sight of like my spiritual growth and like the time I spend with the Lord. And so I think that could definitely be a negative impact. And ultimately it's finding the golden mean, as one would say, of the two, and finding a good balance to where you're not necessarily hindering your growth in one area, but still seeking to grow in both areas.
I'm so glad you brought the golden mean.
Figured it'd come up at some point.
Can I? Okay. We've had to talk about this already. So the golden mean. Can you describe the golden mean for us real quick for those who haven't read Aristotle's?
Yes. So basically, there is an excess and deficiency of, I guess, virtues, and the golden mean is right in the middle. So you're kind of finding the perfect balance between characteristics or
Perfect.
things of that sort.
That is the perfect description of it. So my question is, what would be the excess and what would be the deficit of consistency?
So the excess, I would definitely say, is like an obsession or a dependency on something. I guess, unless it comes to the Lord, I would say in more worldly aspects. Yeah. So I think if you become to the point where you're dependent on something is definitely when it's become an excess. Not just that you're consistent, but now you're like relying on it to function. And then a deficiency, I guess, would just be inconsistency, like just not caring about that thing enough to grow in it.
Yeah. Is it more an incidental interaction with something?
Right. Mm-hmm.
Good. Yeah, I love it. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Hello, Brett.
Hello.
How are you?
Good.
Mr. Snell relegated me to the bullpen. I've always viewed myself more as a starter. But, I guess I'll have to do a new role. So, Brett, tell me, I'm going to go kind of like a way different route, if that's all right.
That's fine.
Okay, tell me your family history. Like, where's your family from?
Like immediate family or like?
Sure.
My mom is from Mississippi,
Okay.
and my dad is from Kingsville.
Okay, cool. So, then you don't have any family in Kansas?
Not currently, no.
So why the Kansas Jayhawks?
So,
I mean, you got a wonderful example of basketball excellence. Just a short trip to the north. But you go to the school that poaches great players. Just saying.
Yeah,
I have a real question. So, what about Kansas Jayhawks? What do you love about the Kansas Jayhawks? Why?
Well, both my parents went to Angelo State. And
that doesn't connect to Kansas.
It will. And I really like college sports, and I didn't really want to root for the Rams, you know.
That's hard to do, though.
So, basically, everyone else in well, not everyone, but a lot of my family went to Kansas, grandparents and uncles and whatnot. Okay. So that was kind of like the next best choice.
All right. So, what do you love about the Kansas Jayhawk basketball program?
They
You
win
can
a
say it.
lot.
Okay, they're good, right?
Uh-huh.
Okay, so why do you think that they are consistently good? What do they do that makes them be consistently good?
I mean, they've definitely built a name for themselves. Like, when you think college basketball, everyone thinks Kansas first, you know?
I don't necessarily agree with that, but okay.
But I feel like they've definitely built a name for themselves, just like Alabama has with football. So I mean, they certainly draw in a lot of high-level talent out of high school, and then they're not like Kentucky where the players just leave after a year. And so I think they do a good job about like developing these players. And I mean, we saw it with Jalen Wilson. He went
With
from
the exception of Kevin McCullers.
yeah, maybe he was a little disappointing.
Yeah,
But
go ahead. Sorry.
but we saw it with like Jalen Wilson was last year. He had a role, but didn't do much. And then this year, he was the best player in college basketball. So you just see like a lot of growth that comes from the program.
So is it their system? Is it the things that they do on a daily basis? I mean, like what do they do? I mean, obviously you may not know specifics, but
Right.
I mean, do they have a consistency to them that leads to that greatness?
Definitely, for sure. I'm not sure exactly what it is, but
Sure.
I'm sure they're very diligent about how they recruit players and then how to use those players in the system and kind of assure them that they may not have a big role now, but like we're going to keep working you hard, and then a few years down the road, it's going to be your turn. So.
Okay, well, let's focus the area down into a little bit onto you then, basketball. I agree with what Mr. Bowden says. When I think of consistent, I think of Brett. Brett Beran was consistently there. But I want you to think about like when you're at practice and you're doing drills over and over and over, and what were the coaches trying to build in you in terms of like your shot? Like were they trying to make it be different every time you threw the ball towards the goal? What were they trying to make it be?
They were trying to make it consistent.
They're trying to make it consistent, right? From the footwork all the way
Right.
to, Mr. Beatty's low on the catch and,
Every time.
all the stuff, right? Well, what are they trying to build in you by doing all those drills over and over and over again?
Consistency, which would then lead to confidence.
Yeah. Do you think muscle memory plays into that?
Definitely.
Okay, then. So if consistency, having a consistent shot is we're doing drills over and over and over again, and we're building muscle memory,
Right.
that means we're doing it without thinking.
Yes.
Okay, so that gets me now to my question. We took a meandering way to get there. Can you have a life of consistency without thinking about it? Is it just muscle memory?
I think in certain areas, yes, but also in certain areas, no. Like, I guess with your example of the shot, yes, but ultimately, if you want your shot to be consistent, you have to keep practicing it. And so I don't think you can just mindlessly show up to the gym and practice your shot. Like, that requires a choice that you have to make to go work on it.
Right. In terms, continue down this train of like having to be able to think about it. Let's think about it in terms of being a servant then. Because you used the example, I love the way you said it. I've heard it a different way, but you said God's not just a buddy that we call on occasionally simply for our own convenience. Simply put, he's not our magic lamp. I've heard him called a cosmic vending machine. Right?
That could work too.
That we just like punch the button and we get out of him what we want.
Right.
But if that's not who God is, and he's called us to serve, can I do that through muscle memory, or does it require some intentionality?
I think it definitely requires some intentionality, just because, like like I said, our human nature is going to be drawn towards sin. I think you can become better at it and grow in it, and it does become easier over time. But I don't think you can ever really fully just do it without thinking. And I mean, I guess you may have your moments where, like, an action comes naturally, but I think ultimately it does require, like, persistence.
Okay, and you said that in order for us to understand what being, let's see, how did you word it? If we were to be the best servant possible, we have to take the position of one.
Right.
In order to be a servant, what does that mean we have to do with ourselves?
Put ourselves last.
Put ourselves aside, right?
Right, or aside, yeah.
And so in order to live consistently, does that mean that there's a dying to self that must take place? A
Definitely.
killing of the me monster, if you will?
For sure.
How do you think we do that?
Wait, sorry, can you ask the question?
Yeah, in order for us to serve consistently,
Right.
we have to die to self. Like what? Can you give me some examples? Like, what do you think that would look like?
Yeah, so basically when you're dying to self, you're just admitting that you are not perfect and that you do need growth. And so I think that's kind of what sparks the consistency, is like, this is an area where I am struggling, or even if I'm not struggling, it's an area where I would like to grow. And so I think admitting that you need to grow is putting yourself aside.
Sure. I've got a couple other thoughts, but I'm going to pass it on and I'll come back to it.
Okay. Can I get some more water real quick?
Yes.
Thank you. I'll do it before you ask the question. Thank you. Okay.
Okay, so let's talk about when the flip side of consistency, when things don't go your way. Can you explain to the audience the process during our senior meetings of trying to schedule a different interview for your thesis?
Oh, yes. So our plan, and it looked good for a while, is I was going to interview Bryce Hopple, who is an Olympic runner, ran for Kansas. As well. And I was close. I got his dad's email, and then I emailed him, and he said that Bryce would do it for sure, and that he'd send me his number. And then I never received the number, which was fine, but we were right there.
Okay, well, I'm going to use that and go into this next example, which is, you guys talked about basketball a little bit, and so, basketball didn't go as well as you guys would have liked this year.
Right.
But you were still there every morning, like Mr. Patterson said. You were still in the weight room, like Mr. Bowden said. So, as believers, like, how do we reconcile, I'm putting in sweat, blood, hours over and over again, and I'm still getting, punched in the face?
Yeah.
Like, how do we get up again the next morning and come back and do it again?
Well, again, it's at some point everyone kind of just had to realize to not focus on the end goal, which would be winning games, because that wasn't going to happen. So I think, like, for all of us, it was probably just like,
Let's put it a different
Like-
way. Like, the rest of us were not on that basketball team, right? But, like, what's a lesson that you guys had to learn, like a life lesson that you
Right.
guys had to learn from that experience that, like, the rest of us can take away for our own lives, our own spiritual walk?
I mean, I think just like appreciating the work you put in, even if it may not lead to the result you want, like you're still gonna see growth. Maybe it's not the end result that you desire, but I mean, all of us are a lot more like, I guess, dedicated now, and it'll help us in all areas of life. We didn't win that many games, but we all grew from this season in many different ways.
Okay. Yeah, so you're a big journey guy then. Like, we have these motivational signs and posters, and it's not the destination, it's the journey.
Exactly.
So, bro, okay, so you're definitely on the journey side of things then, right? Okay.
Uh-huh.
Cool. So speaking of journeys, and kind of tying that into your title of your thesis, a long obedience in the same direction, and being really consistent and diligent with something over the course of a number of years, I want to talk to you about your illustrious and long-tenured career on the MCA golf team.
Oh, yes. So
how many practices did you make? Do you think?
2.
2, yeah.
Sorry, Anthony.
Yeah. How many tournaments did you play in?
2.
2, yeah. Okay, so 1-to-1 ratio. Mm-hmm. Yeah. We still got beat by that guy from Lubbock Trinity. So But my question is, how does this idea of like spontaneity fit into your idea of consistency?
Right. I mean, I think spontaneity, it definitely, I see it as one of the small things that life brings that you can just enjoy. And it's this isn't something I have to be extremely dedicated to, but I can enjoy it. I don't know how to answer.
Yeah, your fellow golf team members were asking me behind your back, how many practices has he missed?
Yeah.
But I do think that there is some tie-in to you are consistent with everything else that you have do in life, whether that's your extracurriculars or your schoolwork, and that gives you the freedom and the ability to have free time to say, here's this thing that I want to spend time on. Well, I have an abundance of time because I have taken care of all of my other, work and ability. And I do want to, just in front of everybody say, thank you and congratulations for being a great senior assistant this year. You were always on time and dedicated, and, I never had to second guess or wonder what's Brett up to. You were always there. You were always diligent and consistent.
Thank you.
So I wanted to touch on that idea of spontaneity, because I think that that's one of those things that just gives us an enjoyment of life.
Right.
If life's always the same thing day after day after day, and I can't ever try something new, then I'm missing out on something. So.
Right. For sure.
All right, I'm gonna pass it.
All right, I want to say I love this topic. Not just because it's so fitting for you, but I wish that at your age I could have spoken on this as well. I could not at your age, not with any kind of authority or experience or even knowledge. So I very much agree with your topic here, and I really appreciate that you are able to give and defend this as a senior in high school. I don't think I could have done that as a senior in college. And I even took a couple extra years to get there. But at the same time, I want to, there's, I guess, not confusion, but there's a few words that have been thrown out through our conversation, and I think you even use it in your oral. That I think for me, once again, I like things to be tied up in a bow at the end. So we have words consistency, obedience.
Right.
The word diligence has been thrown around, and persistence. Right. And so these are 4 words that I think they tie in so intimately together, but yet I wouldn't say that they are synonyms, right?
Right.
Right. You can't take one out and put one and say that's the same thing, right? And so I guess what I wanted to accomplish is kind of just to process through this. Where's the hierarchy? Where's the order? How do they work together? Do 2 of them add together to create one? How would you start that process of kind of, I guess, tying the bow?
Right.
I guess, yeah.
So I would look back at 1 Corinthians 15:18, which says, "Therefore, my beloved brothers, be steadfast, immovable, always abounding in the work of the Lord, knowing that in the Lord your labor is not in vain." So I think ultimately it comes down to an obedience to the Lord, and then, which is, always abounding in the work of the Lord. So that's that obedient aspect.
Yeah.
And then knowing that in the Lord your labor is not in vain, I think that kind of comes to the consistent aspect where it's like, now you're being obedient, and now you just have to be consistent with that obedience and trust that it's not for nothing. And then I guess both of those two things then kind of create that almost like personality trait of diligence or persistence.
So to summarize what you have so far, from what I understand, you take the consistence and the obedience, and you kind of form the diligence through that. So diligence we could maybe define as consistent obedience.
Right.
Yeah, I like that so far. And then maybe persistence and diligence could be synonymous.
Yeah, I would say they're. I don't know the exact definition of the two, but I would
Depends
say
on
that
who
they're
you ask.
right.
Yeah. But I agree. I think that persistence and diligence are probably the most relatable or synonymous.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's a great example of using that passage to do that, and that's exactly what I was looking for. So
Okay. Awesome.
you never disappoint. The next question I wanted to ask, you talked about your conversation with Dr. Fairchild.
Yes, sir.
And he gave encouragement or advice, and he said, and finally in the paper it says he recommends finding someone to hold you accountable.
Right.
Who is that for you?
I mean, it kind of depends on which
Give me one
area
more
of
people.
life.
Yeah.
But I mean, I guess for like schoolwork, it would be parents, and then like sports, it would be coaches, teammates, things like that.
Anybody specific
Gym.
that has kind of been that, I guess, more accountability than just your average friend or teammate?
Coach Rob, definitely for basketball. Definitely like held me accountable and like showing up to practice, working hard, being consistent in that area.
In what ways did he hold you accountable?
Like, I guess always trying to think how to word this.
Yeah, he's sitting right over there, so be careful.
I guess just like never to get too comfortable, if that makes sense. Like, kind of going back to that, there's always growth that can occur. And so, like, I think that he was just always super helpful in helping me to work hard because, I mean, there was always something I could work on, so.
Cool. Yeah, that's a great answer. Before we run out of time, I'm going to hand it over to Mr. Patterson.
Okay, Brett.
Sir.
Is there always a bigger purpose in our consistency? Or do we just put our head down and just do what we're supposed to do just because we're supposed to do it?
There's always a bigger purpose. We may not see it at the time or know what it is necessarily, but I would definitely say that there's always.
Yeah, because there's several things that I wanted to kind of delve into. I'd love to sit down with you and have another conversation when we have more time, because you go through the quote and the things that Nietzsche lists that we should find if we have the life worth living. They seem like big things.
Right.
They don't seem like little things. But you tell me that he's trying to tell us that that'll give us an appreciation for the small things in life. The appreciation, for your words, was the daily grind. How can we not get discouraged going through that daily grind? What do you think is something we can do if we just keep on keeping on?
Like,
Just in general, like if you're going through life and you're just like, man, it seems like all I do is just. I'm older than these guys, and for the more experienced people in the world, you probably remember the Dunkin' Donut commercial where the guy had to get up in the middle of the night, going, "Time to make the donuts," and he didn't have a look of joy on his face. He just every day just got up and went and made the donuts. So how do I fight that? How do I not have this monotony, this drudgery of just got to do the same thing today?
Yeah. So again, I think it's not focusing too much on that end goal or like result necessarily, but kind of just knowing that you're doing the right thing and like seeing the small benefits that can come along the way. So like if you're going to work every day, and like I guess I use this example in the speech, but if you go to work every day and you're only focused on the paycheck, then it's going to become that like drudgery. Yeah. But I think if you're consistent about going to work and you can kind of focus on, making relationships with coworkers or learning something new, or like thankful that you get to provide for your family, things like that, then it's not going to be so like grim, and eventually that end result may come or it may not, but I think being consistent and seeing those small things that life brings will...
Yeah, so having a big goal, but then just kind of like having little mini goals along the way that kind of keep us encouraged. That's really good. Well, Brett, it's been a joy, and like I said, I have a whole lot more that I'd love to talk to you about. But being the caboose, I have to shut her down.
Yes, sir.
So now it's your time to fire at us.
All right.
Go for it.
I'll start with you, actually. So I want to know, how was your taste in music positively impacted by me consistently bringing Zach Bryan to music class?
Well, first off, I always got Luke, Brian, Brown, Zach. I never really got them all figured out.
They're all very different.
They're all very different. The thing that I love about our music class, Brett, is what it does for me is it allows me the opportunity to hear a lot of different stuff. You never knew what Dane was going to walk in with. Skylar was consistently going to have Broadway. I'm surprised we didn't have more metal from Logan. But you bringing, which one did you say again?
Zach Bryan.
Zach Bryan?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry. I'm serious. There's so many of them. That was an artist that I really had never listened to, but it always forces me to kind of open my ears and be open-minded and listen to different things, and sometimes I'll find things that I actually like. I'm like, hey, that's actually pretty good.
Okay.
Don't ask me to tell you if it's Zach Brown, Zach Bryan, Luke Bryan, or is that all?
That's
Luke
all the
Beran?
three. Oh, yeah.
Are you a singer? So no, I enjoyed it very much. That was a fun class.
It was, definitely. I'll end with Mr. Bowden because his is kind of a controversial question. Okay, so we have seen an immense lack of inconsistency when it comes to sports at the University of Texas.
Did you say an immense lack? An immense lack of consistency.
Okay. Sorry.
Yeah.
That at UT.
Okay.
Has that affected your personal ability to be consistent? Because you went there. So I'm wondering.
That's a good question. Well, I listened to an oral the other day about idols. And, I try to put that into practice and not make the golden calf, an idol.
Right.
But the inconsistency that I would say really bothered me is there was a number this year, a statistic that was 66%.
Oh, no.
66% is just not consistent. It's not 100%, but 66% is the amount of times that Texas beat Kansas in basketball this year. And that is really bothering me. So, yes.
Touche. Okay. So this one's controversial.
Oh, good.
It doesn't really have to do with consistency.
Okay, good.
So I've heard you've dabbled in CrossFit. Is that correct?
I have.
Is a CrossFit pull-up a real pull-up? Like, does that count?
So I'm assuming you are
Like the ones where they're
kipping pull-ups.
Yeah, those things.
I would say there's no such thing as a CrossFit pull-up. Kipping pull-ups are originated through gymnastics, and with the desired effect of being able to do multiple of them in a short amount of time. So you're getting from underneath the bar to above the bar with as little time and effort as possible. It is not intended to build strictly strength. It's designed to create capacity of work. And so I would say a kipping pull-up is not the same at all as a strict pull-up. A strict pull-up is created almost entirely to build strength. Okay. And a kipping pull-up is created to provide capacity training.
Okay.
So it is a real tool to provide capacity training. It is not a real tool to create strength.
Okay. I'd probably tear my shoulder out of place if I tried this.
I wouldn't suggest you doing that. Not without being able to do a lot of strict pull-ups.
Right.
Yeah, okay. I'll go ahead and pray us out. Father, thank you so much for Brett, Father, and for what he's desired in the form of excellence and consistency. Father, I thank you for the example that he sets, not just for the younger students, Father, but for even us as tutors that can watch him and be held accountable for our own diligence, Father. I pray that what was said here, Father, is honoring to you and is used by you to impact the lives of others, Father, and that all of our interactions, all of our reactions are glorifying to you and loving to you and to others, Father. Pray all this in your name. Amen.
Amen.